Look at questions 5 and 6, and this is from the SAT number 10. This is the May 2017 QAS test. And so questions 5 and 6, these are paired questions here. So the way that we solve these is by reading the question for question number 5, and then using the answer choices from question 6 to try to kind of select a line or a text that we can then use to answer the question for 5. And this will work about, I always say this will work about 80% of the time. Every now and then you're going to encounter some paired questions like this where you can't choose a text for 6 and you got to choose the answer choice for the first question first, then choose the text after. So you got to be flexible in your approach, but in general it's better to do it in the way that we're doing here. And for this question, I think it ends up working pretty well. So question 5 says, a meaningful irony in the passage is that while the narrator had admired the young Swede's accomplishment, the Swede something. So there's a couple things. We should really try to get a good sense of what the question is asking and kind of make predictions even in advance of looking at the answer choices for 6. So 5 is talking about a meaningful irony. And so when we're talking about irony, the best way to understand that is basically when you have an expectation that gets reversed, or you have an expectation that sort of ends up going the other way. So in this case, we're looking for an irony based on the fact that while the narrator had admired the young Swede's accomplishment, the Swede did something else. So basically here, the narrator he admired the young Swede's accomplishment, he was so enamored by the Swede. So a meaningful irony would be to trump any sort of expectation that you had based on that fact. So if the narrator admired the young Swede's accomplishment, we might expect that he would continue to admire the Swede's accomplishment. Or we might say that we should continue to expect that there's going to be sort of this dynamic where the narrator is always looking up to the Swede, and the Swede is not necessarily looking down towards the narrator, but maybe not looking up to him. And so there's always going to be this dynamic. That would be the expectation. So a meaningful irony would be a reversal of that position, basically where the Swede is looking up to the narrator, or maybe the narrator is looking down to the Swede, or maybe the narrator stops looking up to the Swede, whatever that is. So any sort of reversal of expectation, that's going to be the meaningful irony that we're looking for. And if you remember the passage, there is one moment already that should stick out in our minds. It sticks out in mine, and I'm going to probably predict that that's going to be the event that's happening. But let's just go through the answer choices for now and see if we can basically decide this question based on those. So 6, we're going to look at 22 through 24 as the first ones. So that's going to be right here, where basically the two, clearly a father and his son, were laughing about something together when I approached and introduced myself. I knew your brother at Wequakic. So this is the first meeting. This is where the narrator is introducing himself to the Swede. And I don't really see anything in here that would qualify as a meaningful irony. There's nothing that would sort of reverse an expectation that I have. All it is basically the narrator going up to the Swede and saying, hey, I knew your brother at Wequakic. So I don't think this is a really good answer choice for what we're looking for. But let's look now at 34 through 38, which is down here. So you're the guy, my mother says, and he was such a nice, quiet child when he came to the house. And this is, the Swede quoting his mother. You know who this is? The Swede said to the boy. The guy who wrote those books, Nathan Zuckerman. So this right here is a pretty good answer choice for what we're looking for. And there's a couple ways for how we can recognize this. The first is that if you remember in context, the way that the narrator introduces himself to the Swede is not by saying, yo, what up, Swede? I'm Zuckerman, don't you remember me? Basically, the way he introduces himself is, I knew your brother at Wequakic. So it's almost like the narrator doesn't even think that the Swede will remember who he is or know who he is to begin with. And so when the Swede responds by being like, up here, you're Zuckerman, he replied, vigorously shaking my hand, the author, there's this moment of recognition where the Swede is equally enthusiastic about meeting Zuckerman because of his accomplishments as an author. And this little scene here in these texts sort of continues that. Basically, it's the Swede again recognizing or remembering who the narrator is, who Zuckerman is from the childhood, but also sort of remembering him as the guy who wrote those books. And he's so familiar with Zuckerman as the author that he even expects his son to know who it is, which means that probably the son and the father had some sort of interaction about these books. Maybe they read the books together, or maybe the father is always talking to his son about these books. So there's enough recognition for the Swede to think that if he says those books, that the son is going to know who he's talking about. Even though the son kind of acts mystified, like he doesn't really know what's going on. But that's besides the point. So this is a good answer choice because this would reverse an expectation. Whereas the narrator looked up to the Swede as a kid, here we kind of see the Swede looking up to the narrator later in life by saying, wow, you're this famous author. You're the author of those books that I really enjoy. So this is a good answer choice for is B. So we're going to look at C, which is line 52, and that's basically saying, you bet, take it easy, Skip. And this is basically the Swede saying goodbye to the narrator. He's using this nickname here, Skip, which maybe is this reversal of expectation because we should expect that the Swede doesn't really even know who the narrator is, so wouldn't be so familiar as to use this nickname. But it's not as strong as the last text that we looked at, because the last text we looked at is a more significant moment of recognition. So this is probably not going to be a good answer choice either. There's not enough going on in there. Then we have lines 54 through 56, which is here. He laughed, we parted, and someone was saying to me, well, the greatest athlete in the history of Wequakic High called you Skip. And this is sort of basically elaborating from the point of view of another character, this last little moment here where the Swede ends by calling the narrator Skip. So maybe this could work as a meaningful irony because it's another reversal of expectations where the Swede recognizes the narrator when we would expect him not to. But if that's true, it's not as significant a moment as this up here. So for that reason, I think we can also eliminate answer choice D. So that's going to leave us with answer choice B, and I think that's pretty good. I think it makes sense, right? I think it makes sense to say that this right here is a meaningful irony. Whereas the young Swede, or the narrator admired the young Swede's accomplishment, here we see the Swede recognizing the narrator for who he is and recognizing him as the author of these books which he really enjoys. So let's try to choose an answer choice now for question 5 based on that. So this says the meaningful irony is that, again, while the narrator admired the young Swede, the Swede had trained his son to follow in his footsteps. So this is a very specific claim and a pretty strong claim, and kind of funny to think that the Swede is training his son to follow in the narrator's footsteps. It's not going to be a good answer choice here because we don't have enough evidence to support it. It's just way too strong for the evidence that's given to us. All we know is that the Swede and the son must have had some interaction over the books and some recognition or familiarity with the books. For the Swede to say this is the guy who wrote those books, but not that he trained him to follow in the narrator's footsteps. B says that the Swede appreciated the narrator's accomplishments as an adult. This would match the text that we have, where basically he's like, yo, you're the dude who wrote these books, and obviously he shows some appreciation for those accomplishments. I also like this answer choice just because of how general it is. Appreciated is a pretty neutral, positive assessment of something, and then the narrator's accomplishments is pretty general as well. So it has that nice SAT correct answer choice quality. So it's a good answer choice. Let's keep it. C says that the Swede had failed to achieve his promise as the years went by. This doesn't really match any of the passage or any of the text that we look at, and even in the passage, it doesn't really say that. Although basically the Swede is presented as having so much promise as a young man, as this athlete, and maybe he's not as famous or as accomplished as we would expect. None of the texts talk about it, but really the passage doesn't really make the case that he failed to achieve his promise. It doesn't really say too much about it. So it's not a good answer choice. Let's get rid of C. Then we have D, which says that the Swede envied the achievements of his more scholarly classmates. This doesn't really answer or match any of the text that we have, and it doesn't really match anything in the passage where we show the Swede envying or maybe feeling a regret that he wasn't as scholarly as some of the other students that they went to high school with. So that's not a good answer choice either. We should eliminate D, and that's going to leave us with answer choice B for question 5 and answer choice B for question 6.